This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Chris Kwiecinski now joins us on the McClarty Daniel hotline. And Chris, I really appreciate the time. And if I listen, my boss is laughing right now, so if I butchered last name, I tried to say it 10 times before.
You did work on that.
And I still failed epically. So I appreciate you making some time for us, even with the horrid introduction. If you could just kind of treetop to our listeners what happened in Missouri this week with the NIL change that happened with coaches and high school players.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about it, first off, you don't worry about my last name. You're not the first, and you're definitely not going to be the last. It's the occupational hazard that comes with it. But I think that the most interesting thing about it is that this has just been in the making for a while. This is something that's been talked about throughout the summer. It's been something that's been in the works for better part of a year. I'd probably say even further than that. And we're starting to see the fruitions of that, especially this past week with Mizzou landing a 5-star prospect out of the Kansas City area and Williams-Dawn area. I mean, you're talking about changes to a law that we don't know if that'll stay that way, but right now it's really majorly benefiting Missouri athletes.
How is it benefiting? Kind of break this down for us. We've heard about high school athletes being able to profit off their NIL and how that's benefiting Mizzou. Kind of walk us through that for those who are on the outside looking in.
Absolutely. It's what it comes down to is we all know what NIL is now. It's allowing them to benefit off their own name, image, likeness, everything about themselves as an athlete. And obviously that was monumental when that really occurred and when that was passed in law in 2021. But now in Missouri, NIL athletes can start benefiting off that and kind of make their money and kind of start making that profit as soon as they sign the national letter of intent. So as long as you sign with a school in Missouri and you're a Missouri State athlete, you can start making NIL money with your Missouri school. And it's only if you're a Missouri resident. You have to be a Missouri in-state, going to an in-state school. You can't go from, one school to outside or outside coming in and vice versa, anything like that. You have to be very much so a Missouri resident going to a Missouri school.
So I want to make sure I understand this. If I'm a Missouri resident and I sign a national letter of intent with an in-state school, I can begin to collect money from their collective. Like if I sign with Mizzou, like this player apparently is going to do, he can begin to get money from that collective. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's
okay. All right.
Right away,
I just wanted to make sure I understood where the money was coming from.
Yeah, it's something I know that's probably going to be continuously hashed out. I know there's a lot of different, I would say words. I would say a lot of different discussions, because I remember even when this was beginning to be announced in discussions with the athletic department, when the releases were coming out, I mean, I was calling people and talking to them like, okay, wait, how do I describe this? What are the words I should use? Because it's really not easy to figure this out. It's really not easy to even comprehend just simply. It's like you really need to kind of sit down and think, okay, how does this impact compliance? How does it impact a lot of different things? And I know the release that was sent out when this was announced in, I think, June, July, was very simply like, it really was panned over by lawyers. And it was panned over by different people in compliance to make sure the verbs and the words used are all correct, because this is something that still is being studied and is really even evolving every single year. NIL is still so confusing because it's not concrete yet, and it's still changing, and I have a feeling that this law is going to still keep changing.
So is Missouri doing, is this the first of its kind? Is there another state out there that's similar, or is Missouri the first state to pass anything that would allow a high school player to start benefiting from NIL?
That I'm not too sure of. I looked into that, and I couldn't find a definitive answer. My gut wants to say no, it's not, but I don't know exactly for sure.
So, obviously, there's two major cities, the two biggest cities in the state also border other states, Kansas City and St. Louis. What problems can you see with, you've got a high school kid that's just on the other side of St. Louis, on the Illinois side or on the Kansas side of Kansas City? What kind of issues do you think this is going to create in prep sports, and where people may ultimately end up choosing to play their high school sports at?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to that I guess the unregulated part. You want to talk about some of the issues with high school sports nowadays, where kids can transfer to go where they want, to play where they want, to put themselves in a better position, and obviously if they're moving from one position to another to benefit themselves and to get a situation that leads them to ultimately a better athletic experience, that's one thing. But I mean, if you're talking about moving to then start benefiting and that kind of stuff, it's just a different conversation where you kind of have to sit back and say, okay, like, well, is this for the right reasons? And you could probably see that I'm not sure if this has happened because this is a relatively new law, but like you just mentioned, like you might see a bunch of transfers going from one part of the border across the other side because of stuff like this. And I don't know if that's happened. I don't know if it will happen. Frankly, there's been plenty of high school movement regardless of this law. But I think when you kind of integrate this right now, you're starting to think of, well, there's nothing to regulate it, so what's going to happen then? I think it's just kind of the next step of this law kind of brings you to that step, which is, well, how do you regulate something which is, honestly, it's just hard to regulate, period.
Chris, do you think bordering states act on this soon and follow through similar to what Missouri has done this week?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know about soon, but I can probably tell you that other states are kind of watching it to see what happens. Absolutely, yeah. And I think when it comes to making a big splash like landing a 5-star recruit, that's not something you can really ignore. And that's when it comes to NIL nowadays, I mean, you're talking about one thing that's starting to level the playing field. I mean, 2 years ago, Luther Burden was the third best recruit, or was the second best recruit Missouri ever landed at the program. He was a 5-star player, behind, I think, Dorial Green Beckham Jr. And now when you land Williams Molinari, who is now the second overall player, bumps Luther Burden down a spot. And you have to wonder how much of NIL was a factor in this recruitment. You kind of think, yeah, probably good chunk. That's how you level the playing field nowadays against Oklahoma, against Georgia, against Alabama. And when it comes down to it, if that's how you can start landing players that can make a difference in your football team and your football field and ultimately your athletic department, people are probably going to start taking note of that.
I think the other part of this is the coaching, be able to walk through the negotiations. What kind of impact do you think that could have, I'm assuming, for Eli Drinkowitz and some of those other coaches on staff?
I think it's difficult because I don't know the specifics of that. Like, I don't know how you negotiate those kinds of things. I don't know who's negotiating them. And frankly, it's probably something that's still up for debate. Like I was telling you guys, like this law may be pretty unique in of itself, where I don't know many, if at all, any other states are kind of doing it like this, or even if they have, they're doing it, they're certainly not doing it at the SEC level, I don't think. It's kind of out there right now to where you don't really know, who's making these decisions, who's talking about what, but I do know it's heavily compliance. I do know it's heavily panned over, and whoever's making those decisions and making those discussions is approved, and it has to do it by the book, or else, the book's going to get thrown at you.
All right, Chris Kwiecinski joining us here on the McLarty Daniel Hotline. Great insight on what's going to be an ever-changing world when it comes to NIL and high school sports. Chris, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.